My name is Ben Gaspard. I am the manager of the SCADA services here at the Integration Group of Americas. TIGA is a software services company that focuses on industrial SCADA systems in multitudes of different areas, including oil and gas, pharmaceutical, energy, and even critical water services. We comprise of an automation group, also as a SCADA services group, and also a software development group that handles independent applications. EXCO's previous 7.9 system was full of features and very useful, however, did not have mobile capabilities, and in some instances the functionality would bloat and slow down the system. EXCO brought TIGA on board to maintain the 7.9 system and even increase functionality and usability of the system. EXCO had a lot of ideas and very progressive ways that they wanted to operate, and I felt like it would be best done in 8.1 to leverage perspective and functionalities that Ignition 8.1 could provide with newer modules and even mobile applications. Mobile was the biggest requirement that EXCO had. We wanted to make sure we put it in a way that we could develop it from multiple different areas at EXCO. They had operations, engineering, field engineers, and we wanted to make sure that we could make a desktop version of this, still used in a control room, but also still used by field and mobile, without having to redevelop any of the views to do so. EXCO's previous 7.9 system had multiple champions until we got involved. There was a lot of great ideas that were in the system. However, they were developed in isolation. So a lot of these ideas and schemas that were put into place for some of these pieces of development ended up not traveling along with everything else, which caused the system to be somewhat antiquated and somewhat confusing in some senses. There was no consistency, which caused issues with loading data quickly. Some functionalities didn't operate as intended. UDT instances were built for single tags, so instead of having multiple tags per instance, there was only one tag per UDT instance, and that caused a lot of troubles whenever we were trying to develop something in a dynamic sense. Multiple data structures were split between multiple sources, so there were times where if we wanted to leverage metadata to use a certain functionality that we wanted to build into the system, we may have accidentally or inadvertently built it off of a database that was not still being maintained, or we had to create one. Screens were not built dynamically, unfortunately, so the more assets that we had to add on a whole new view or a whole new window to be able to support these things. EXCO's 7.9 system existed on a single gateway, which caused resource limitation at some point once they started to put in more functionality or had more assets that they were adding to it. One of the big functionalities we made was a ticketing system that they could use from a mobile perspective, as well as a control room could manage it with alarms bound to it. So these tickets can be closed by the field, can be opened or maintained by the field, have even Ignition manage some of these tickets and close them by themselves. Guys in the field didn't have to be bothered with nonsense tickets, maybe that something would happen in the field and Ignition would automatically close it, and we made sure those parameters were nice and tidy. The alarm tier system would allow them to create alarms or manage alarms in a holistic sense. We partnered with them. They came up with the idea to be able to manage these alarms based off of maybe percentage of other tags or variables that were consistent, and that could be set, even down to the point where we could set delays or sets of enabled and disabled based off a value reaching above a certain height or below or even equal to. Other things we've incorporated were callouts. One of the big problems with 7.9 that they had was that calling back so much of this data per site, per piece of equipment, was pretty slow. And what we had to do is make it to where it was usable, even from a mobile standpoint, that we had to call all of this data. More importantly, data that was important to the user that was using it. Calling back massive amounts of data in huge filters, sometimes up to like 2,000 rows. You know, they had operations, they had enterprise, they had field techs out there. They were all looking at different things. So we really leaned into that and used more of a personalization effort for all grids. Any type of situation where we would use cards that were dedicated to an individual, and we wanted to make sure that was pulled in fast and efficiently. And if it wasn't, it wouldn't be usable to them or as effective as their current 7.9 system. Our biggest goal was to merge these three asset areas that were massively different in what it was collecting, but we wanted to make sure that every user group could also access each one of these. There were multiple different departments at EXCO, one being engineering operations. They had a control room that was going to use the same system, and also accounting was using this as well. Some of the production engineers, as well as field techs. We wanted to make sure that we made one system that we can maintain from one single standpoint and architecture, to where we didn't have to develop additional views to be able to give those same capabilities to different user groups. So we made sure that during this process that everything was cross-compatible. We wanted to make sure it had a golden standard. We wanted to make sure that it could link into other OT systems.
My name is Stephen Babineau. I work at TIGA, and I am a senior systems engineer. We added a lot of user preferences to their system that allowed the users to quickly navigate to the respective sites. Since they had 3 different assets, they basically had 3 different users that needed to see kind of separate items. So adding user preferences narrowed down having to do the same repetition actions over and over again. So we changed their navigation from a tree view that just listed all of their sites in specific folders to a filtering drop-down system. So they can choose a specific asset and then drill down to a specific site and then view multiple different views for that specific site without having to navigate away from that site and choosing to choose something else. This table was able to isolate the data that each asset needed to view instead of displaying all of the information all at once that may not be useful for that specific user looking at it. And it also cut down the size of the table and how much information was being displayed. So since it was less information, we were able to display it quicker and have quicker load times because of that. We implemented the dashboard and basically created all of these single-use screens into widgets that the user can use the user preferences and customize their dashboard. So there's no searching for data that they're looking for. They set it and they're done. So every time they open that screen, they know exactly where they're looking for it. If there's any troubles or issues that you need to troubleshoot with those equipment, we allowed the users to look at other people's dashboards to quickly get a glance to look at exactly what's going wrong. The user preferences make it so easy to customize so that no 2 users have to have the same experience. They can generate their own views, their own dashboards. They can make it fully custom to only things they need to look at, so there's no bloat, there's no extras in their eyes. They can see exactly what they need and only what they need. The centralized source of metadata improved how fast we could filter items, how fast we can load things on screens, and how fast we can generate reports. The reporting module is useful to generate reports for external use for people outside the company that don't have access to any of the screens. The perspective module makes it extremely easy to develop any idea of any screen. The perspective module allows for dynamic views, so we don't have to create view after view for every single idea. We can create one view that's dynamic, that's useful for almost any user that needs to touch that screen. Perspective also allows for the mobile views, so if somebody's out of the office and needs to access something quickly, they can just open their phone and look at that same screen. We use the web dev module to host our documentation for the system on their gateway, so any user was able to access it if they had any questions at any point on any screen. I think the biggest achievement was improving the load times of things. There were instances where we would click and have to wait a minute or more for things to load, and being able to show them how quick it was to just navigate through their system and go screen to screen was really good.
A large part of this development was to make sure that the system that they ended up with was something that they can maintain going forward without any additional development. The gateway architecture that TIGA had produced allowed us to add on additional gateways at any point as tag IO gateways as they acquired new assets. Many data accelerators and utilities that we provided to the front-end user allowed them to build new metadata structures or even add new pieces of equipment or sites, all without needing additional development. Customer satisfaction is that success criteria. That was the biggest thing we wanted to accomplish. Some of the greatest functionalities in that system, and every system that we build, is always customer driven. It's not something that we build out of the box and slap in. Really, their input heavily drove the success of the system and the functionalities. Really, it was anything that EXCO could dream up that we would try to implement as efficiently and optimal as possible.
The Ignition platform allowed us to be able to say yes to basically anything. Any request that they would think up was doable, and we did it.